without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our speaker today. Danielle Legros Georges is a Haitian-born American poet, essayist, and academic. She is a professor of creative writing at the Lesley University MFA program in creative writing in Cambridge. Her areas of focus include contemporary American poetry, African American poetry, Caribbean literature and studies, literary translation, and the arts and education. She is the creative editor of SX Salon, a digital forum for innovative, critical, and creative explorations of Caribbean literature. Ms. Legros Georges is a lover of her home country, and you will hear more about that today. Before I bring her to the podium, I have an announcement. Unfortunately, all of her books are sold out and have not yet arrived. I know. There are book plates that she will sign. When the books come, you can place that book plate onto the book. For those of you who will still be here, you can secure those books once they arrive from the CLSC. For those of you who will not be here because you're leaving Chautauqua, you may order the book online and then place the book plate there. Without further ado, let's welcome Ms. Legros Georges.
Thank you, Cecilia, for my introduction. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here and to be part of this year's African American Heritage House Speaker Series and to address the topic, A Life of Literature, which I know both the House and the Assembly are exploring this week. Thank you, Errol Davis, for the invitation. Thank you, Soni Tonime, who is here. Thank you, Soni, and Sydney Smith for delivering me safely to this very stage. My lecture this afternoon is entitled 3 Leaves from the Tree of Haitian Poetry. And I only noticed all the assonance, all the repetition of the E sounds, the E-E-Es, as I was reading the lecture aloud for the first time yesterday morning. But despite the E's, we will forge ahead. Through the lecture, you will be introduced to or renew your acquaintance with a couple of great Haitian poets. Great, in my opinion. The first being Félix Morisseau-Leroy, the second being Ida Faubert, both of whom were writing and engaging the world in the 20th century in Haiti and in other parts of the world. I'm just going to lower the mic with the awful mic lowering sound here. So I mentioned to you 3 leaves, did I not? And you are wondering about that 3rd leaf, are you not? Well, that would be moi. Affixed to the tree and making what I hope is a positive contribution to its photosynthetic process. So I will read some of my own poems toward the end of the presentation. And I want to note that while I am the 3rd leaf mentioned today, there are many leaves, excellent writers in Haiti and its global diaspora feeding the great Haitian literary tradition, which has been flourishing since the birth of the nation in 1804. So let us shed beautiful, dappled light now on Félix Morisseau-Leroy, who was born in 1912, one more crank. Born in 1912 in a town called Grand-Gosier on the southern coast of Haiti, a coastal town. He was a writer, an educator, activist, and champion of the Haitian Creole language, which is also referred to as Creole or Haitian Creole, and more recently, simply Haitian. I will use the term Creole or Haitian Creole in this talk. Mauriceau Leroy was born into a middle-class family, and he spent his childhood in the cities and surrounding countryside of Grand-Gosier and later Jacmel, a beautiful coastal town. Some of you know Jacmel, known for its many artists and great carnival. So he distinguished himself as a student and engaged in early acts of activism, responding to the unpopular U.S. military occupation of Haiti, which occurred between or at least the first one, between 1915 and 1934. And he also responded to what he saw as inequity in Haitian society. So he came of age under that occupation. He then went to the capital, Port-au-Prince, to do his university studies and received a law degree from the University of Haiti, while publishing early poems in notable periodicals in the capital and developing a growing reputation as a poet. He returned to Jacmel after school, where he taught and served as an administrator in the Ministry of Education. And then he moved to New York for a couple of years to do graduate work at Columbia University and received a master's degree in education in 1943. Mauriceau Leroy is a poet beloved by Haitian listeners and readers. Haitian listeners and readers. And I say listeners, or listeners precedes readers, because people who encountered his poems for the first time often heard them broadcast via radio in Port-au-Prince and elsewhere in Haiti from the 1950s until he died in 1998. And his voice also rode the airwaves across the Haitian diaspora, so he could be heard through recordings in the cities with large Haitian populations here in the United States, Miami, New York, Boston, Chicago. But his voice could also be heard in Kinshasa, in Paris, Montreal, Dakar. Back to the idea of listeners. So I mentioned listeners to emphasize the power of Haitian radio and to indicate a context in which print literacy and access to formal education have been, historically and now, a challenge for large numbers of Haitian citizens in Haiti. To say listeners is to reveal the long arm of colonialism and its contribution to the country's poverty, achieved in part through an enduring policy of linguistic imperialism or linguistic apartheid. Haitian Creole, as you know, is the language spoken by almost all Haitians. 99.9% of Haitians speak Creole. And French is the language spoken by a small minority, historically and now. Yet French has been the language of formal education, of literature for a very long time, legal proceedings, governmental affairs, affairs of state. So you see French operating as a language of privilege, a language of power in Haiti. And it wasn't until 1987 that Creole, the language of all Haitians, or almost all Haitians, was officially recognized as the second language of the state. And Creole hadn't even been allowed to be uttered in Haitian schools, primary and secondary schools, until 1979. So can you imagine a country in which the language you speak, the language we speak, is not the language you can use in the classroom, not the language in which textbooks are written, not the language of legal proceedings. So if you were called before, a judge, right, that would not be the language. Us, you'd have to confront the judge in French. Okay, so just to give you a sense of what was happening on the linguistic front in Haiti. So as early as the 1940s, as a leading educator, and still as a young man in his 30s, Maurice Leroy became a vocal promoter of the use of Haitian Creole as an instructional language in schools at a time when French existed as the sole national language. He argued that Creole merited greater attention in the realms of education, culture, and literature, and began to create literary texts in the language, when it was really almost unheard of. Creole was an oral language, and people told stories in it, but it hadn't been, for the most part, written down. So his decision to use Creole as a language of literary production was decidedly a political one, and one that initially met resistance in the country's influential and Francophone or French-speaking literary circles. He was a member of the intellectual elite, and he was then an emerging literary figure. He tied the Creole question to the quest for civic inclusion of all Haitians in the life of the nation, in the life of their nation. One of the most important Haitian writers to do so, he paved the way for contemporaries and a following generation of Haitian Creole Haitian Creole writers, creating an aesthetic space for texts that celebrated and reflected historically marginalized Haitian Creole concerns, culture, and identity. So now I would like to read to you one of his poems. It is a short one entitled Moi-même ou même, or You, Me. I'll read you the Creole, and then I will read you my English translation of it. This one was published in 1972, the original. Moi-même ou même, lui-même, yo-même, comme dit moi, c'est li. L'em dit li, c'est où. Yo c'est moi, c'est li, c'est ou même. Nous c'est nous-mêmes même. Nous toutes fin vie laide. Nous toutes coupables ou innocents. À qui on pays sous bran, kou yon ti moun malade. Me, you. Me, you, she, they. When I say him, it's you. When I say you, they are me, are him. We are ourselves, ourselves. We've all grown tired and ugly, all as guilty as we are innocent, bearing one country in our arms like a sick child. Moi-même ou même is one of Maurice Leroy's lesser-known poems. It's made of only 9 short lines. Its title, Me, You, heralds the straightforwardness of the poem's language and its poetics. Maurice Leroy was writing deliberately for the everyday person, the common child. The title, You, Me, suggests a pair. A relationship is drawn immediately, as is the possibility of a dialogue. What the poet gives us, however, is a monologue which speaks others into being. Me, you, are joined by he, she, and they, this list of simple pronouns, with each term standing alongside and giving way to the next. When I say me, I mean her, him. When I say him, it's you. These lines introduce and expand the important notion of interchangeability and boundarylessness in the poem. The poem's fifth and central line finally articulates a previously tacit we. We are ourselves. This is who we are. Anchoring the concept of the collective, the condition beyond the individual. And that line is followed by this one. We've all grown tired and ugly. Here, time and space shift, and the speaker's perspective becomes an analytic one. The line affects a transition towards the poem's second thesis, shared history. This history, referenced but not elaborated, has resulted in a weariness of the community. A paradoxical statement follows, labeling the community as both culpable and innocent. We've all grown tired and ugly. We are all as guilty as we are innocent. We're all tied up in this, right? And to render these abstractions of guilt and goodness concrete, Mauriceau Leroy gives us an image of a sick child in our arms and a powerful metaphor. The child becomes a country. So we, the collective, then instantly become the custodians of that child, in addition to being the bearers of the scars of history. We are ourselves. We've all grown tired and ugly, all as guilty as we are innocent, bearing one country in our arms, like a sick child. So you see Mauriceau Leroy's leitmotifs and themes, which are the connections between individuals, the weight of history, the implication of the individual in the civic, and parental and collective responsibility. Social and political ideas are important here, but they are not Mauriceau Leroy's only considerations. Aesthetics matter, and Mauriceau Leroy's singular use of syntax, grammar, attention to structure, and use of poetic elements are apparent. The poem's formal aspects lean toward the lyric. Less painter than sculptor, I would argue, less photographer than drummer, Mauriceau Leroy engages in a rhythmic chiseling out of content, a building up of metaphysical structure through a litany of pronouns, each followed by the reflective notion of the self. So here is sameness and difference simultaneously. Here are repetitions and a parallelism that allow for great nuance. Finally, discovery and literacy are also implied. Evoked in the utterance and repetition of pronouns is early education, our first incremental lessons in declension and exposures to the architecture of language. I am, you are, you remember those lessons? He, she is, it is, they are. So he gives us a fundamental lesson on who we are through language and through relationship. If Félix Mauriceau Leroy is a great teacher and literary forefather, then Ida Faubert, born in the late 19th century and blazing through most of the 20th century, is a formidable literary foremother. She was born in 1882 in Port-au-Prince, the daughter of a Haitian man who happened to be Haitian president at the time, Lysius Salomon, and a French mother, Florentine Potiez. As happens, political events forced her father out of office and her family to expatriate to France when Faubert was 6 years old. And there she was sent to convent school, like many elite girls of her time, and she grew up in France's Belle Époque, a period of flourishing arts in a stable Europe between 1871 and 1914, just before the start of World War I. And as a young woman, she entered Paris's artistic and cultural circles. In 1903, in her early 20s, Faubert returned to Haiti, where she made a splash. She made an impression on members of Port-au-Prince's cultural elite and privileged classes with her charm, her verse, and her lineage. The country's elite class produced the published writers of the day through resources, venues, and social connections. Is that different today? And Faubert was well situated as an emerging poet in Haiti. There, she participated in women's literary circles of the time at the turn of the century, and she also took part in an influential literary movement called La Ronde, the Round, which flourished between 1900 and 1920s. And poets of that movement articulated the need for a universal lyric, that is, one that would place Haitian literature in the perceived larger stream of Francophone or French-speaking letters, in particular French letters. Members of that movement, the La Ronde movement, addressed customs and concerns having to do with Haiti in their work, but also larger themes or broader themes, including love, melancholy, death, and religious and spiritual concerns. And Faubert's carefully wrought poems contained these themes, as well as a subtle style, and they began to appear in Haitian journals in 1912. It's possible, too, that she published poems under an assumed name, a pen name, adopting a strategy that was not unusual for women, for Haitian women at the time, and women in general. Again, question, what's that about? Could it be patriarchy? That's another lecture, though. Moving along. So she was among the rare women whose work appeared under her own name in the early part of the 20th century. Despite personal attainments and early literary success, as she moved between Haiti and France in her 20s, she found the mores and strictures of Port-au-Prince's high society stifling. It is also rumored that she engaged in some scandalous love affair, which sent her packing back to Paris, but we don't know yet. So. She returned permanently to France in 1914, just before the outbreak of World War I in Europe, and a year prior to the 19-year American military occupation of Haiti that would deeply shake Haitian society and engender a profound anti-US, anti-colonial reaction in many Haitian citizens and writers. It was during the occupation that the seeds of Haiti's indigenous movement found fertile ground, and this movement was a nationalist affirmation that would place Haitian folklore, the Haitian countryside, and the Haitian peasant at the heart of Haitian literature and visual arts. And I want to note that the Haitian indigenous movement would inform, draw from, and overlap with the Harlem Renaissance movement here in the United States, and the Negritude movement launched a bit later in Paris, in France. So in Paris, Faubert served as a volunteer in Parisian hospitals, tending to the wounded soldiers returning from France's military front lines. And as a woman of letters, she attended lectures and literary events. She opened up her own salon to receive artists and intellectuals. She frequented feminist and lesbian writers, many situated in Paris's Bohemian left bank. Some scholars have suggested that Faubert engaged in amorous relationships with women, and read a number of her poems as celebrations of women's sensuality, addressed to lovers whose genders are not specified. And then there are the poems dedicated to particular women. So to Madame Hergé, for example, Faubert writes, "You cause so much grief with your bewitching eyes." In 1939, Faubert published her first book, a volume of poems entitled Cœur des Îles, or Island Heart, the majority of whose poems I have translated in this book, Island Heart. Her work interested me for a long time, in part because she's a Haitian literary foremother. I wasn't aware of Haitian women poets when I was a young person and first becoming a poet, in part because of her unusual biography, and in part because of her formal precision as a poet. So I'd like to share one of her poems with you. I'll read it to you in her French original, so you can hear the beautiful rhythms and rhymes, and then I will read you my English translation. It's entitled Tropical Night, in French, Soir tropical. Le soir est lumineux, le soir est tendre et beau. Le soleil s'est éteint, la lune est sur les roses. Une langueur pénètre au cœur même des choses. Les grands palmiers noirs rêvent au bord de l'eau. Les jasmins ont mêlé leurs branches étoilées aux lianes en fleurs. La laine de l'été caresse les fruits lourds. La grave volupté laisse traîner son voile au détour des allées. Là-bas, sur le chemin, pas un chant, pas un bruit. Rien ne trouble la paix d'un bonheur qu'on écoute. Viens sentir les parfums sur le bord de la route et respirer mon âme et parse dans la nuit. Tropical night. The night is luminous. The night is tender and beautiful. The sun has obscured itself. The moon rests on the roses. A languor enters the very heart of things, and the tall black palms dream at the water's edge. The jasmines have mixed their star-studded branches with lianas in bloom. Summer's breath caresses the heavy fruit. The dense sensuality lets its long veil linger along the sinuous paths. Over there, on the way, not a song, not a sound, nothing disturbs the peace of a joy we listen to. Come, take in the fragrances at the road's edge and breathe in my soul spread across the night. I think it's safe to call this a love poem, a poem of desire, and yet there is a sense of privacy too. Things are intimated but not exposed. There's nothing glaring. The sun has obscured itself, the bright eye of the sun, right? And what is tender and beautiful is not the lover, but the night, in which nature comes alive, in which the tall black palms dream at the water's edge, in which the jasmines have mixed their branches with the lianas. So then there is the caressing of the heavy fruit. By whom? Summer's breath, of course. We don't have an articulation of a we until the third and last stanza. And the we, the lovers, do what? They listen to a particular joy, expressing a quiet agency. They are not seen. They are not bodies gazed upon or beheld by an external or omniscient gaze. So Flaubert often writes about knees and hands and arms and enclosed gardens, etc. And I believe this has to do with the question of the gaze, G-A-Z-E, right? A scrutability or the complicating the notion of the gaze. I think this is something she's working out as she negotiates concepts of race and gender in her work, refusing popular tropes or stereotypes assigned to women of color in contemporary European imaginations. So while engaging in what I'll call a poetics of subtle resistance, Flaubert pays great attention to technique and leans into and employs fixed or traditional poetic forms like sonnets and chansons and rondelles. She's masterful. She's just like, she's got chops for days. She knows it and she shows it. She would go on to publish a book of short stories, Sous le soleil Caraïbe, Beneath the Caribbean Sun. And then in the decades following World War II, she maintained contact with writers and friends and colleagues and artists, scholars, and would welcome them to her home when they visited France. She quietly supported causes on behalf of the unhoused and those wounded in the war. She was a complex literary figure, bicultural, biracial, privileged. She neither easily fits socially prescribed categories for women of color in France or Haiti, nor conformed to them. So this is the moment in which I, third leaf of the day, subject you to some of my poems while remaining mysterious about my biography. But I will share that my parents were encouraged to emigrate by the François Duvalier dictatorship in Haiti, and were among the thousands of then young Haitian professionals who moved to Africa in the 1960s and 1970s. And so they were part of a UNESCO teaching corps, and they taught in what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And a lot of the people who participated in that project would later end up in other parts of the world, Paris, Montreal, Boston, where I grew up, New York, Miami, elsewhere. A stateless poem. If you are born and you are stateless, if you are born and you are homeless, sorry, there's a little mosquito here. If you are born and you are homeless, if your state and your home are not yours, and yet everything you know, what are you? Who are you? And who am I without the dark fields I walk upon, the streets I know, the blue corners I call mine, the ones you call yours? Who am I to call myself citizen and human and free? And who are you to call yourself landed and grounded and free? And who is judge enough? Who native? Who other? And who are we who move so freely without accents of identification, without skin of identification, with all manner of identification, with gold seals of approval, with stamps of good fortune, with the accident of blameless birth? Who are we to be so lucky? And I will close with this poem, switching gears. It is entitled, How to Kiss. And we Haitians have this nasty habit of kissing people when we greet them. We're not the only ones. The French do it. People in Latin America do it too, other parts. So when you encounter your friend, your partner, a relative, you might greet her or him or them with kisses. A kiss on each side of the face. And if you're very, very happy to see somebody, you might greet them with 4 kisses. And if from the valley of the shadow of death you see coming toward you your twin from whom you had been separated at birth, you might greet them with 6 kisses. So Haitian kids learn very early on that they must kiss their relatives when everybody comes over and sits in the living room, the parlor, or in the courtyard, or wherever. So you got to line up. So, how to kiss. The children know how to kiss, to descend stairwells when called, into rooms of colored lips, whispered entendres, demure smiles. The uncle who en Creole calls us cochon marron, wild pigs. We walk into crooned comment vas-tu's, rolling too long from gold-filled mouths, thistly jowls. We kiss the cheek, the next cheek, and more cheeks, the odors of Vitalis, the smart man's hair tonic, of Bain Champagne, Chanel No. 5, Eau de Floride, various adult O's. We bristle in advance against the teenager whose 5 o'clock shadow goes from Sunyard to sit in parlors, his knees eclipsed in cloth, a foreshadow that we too would be the kissed. But Pascal had the audacity once to alter form, opening her mouth, to snake a tongue that swept beige powder from the face of Madame Altagrace la Vache, exposing a patch of brown from chin to ear. Un véritable scandale. Tongue on cheek, truth in deed. The wild pigs. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Mademoiselle. Thank you so much for bringing to us poets that we might not otherwise have met, voices that we may not have heard previously, and it's certainly consistent with the mission of the African American Heritage House to elevate marginalized voices, particularly those of Black people. So thank you very much. Thank you, audience. Questions should be typed into your devices, please. questions.chq.org if you have any questions. If you wrote one before I said that, it may have gotten erased. So send it to me again. And we have cards, too, if you'd like to write it on cards, if device is not your thing. While I'm waiting for those, I would ask a question around the statement, we are as guilty as we are innocent. I agree with you. What is the overall basis, I think, for the statement, do you think?
Yeah. I think Mauriceau Leroy was trying to not get into binaries. I think he was trying to draw a situation in which we were all responsible for what takes place in our communities.
Great.
Whether we're very active in our engagement or not, because not acting is a decision too.
Thank you. Will you tell us a little bit about your writing process?
I write in different genres. I write poetry, I write critical essays, I sometimes write a little fiction. With poetry, historically, I have waited for the lightning strike of inspiration. And then I write something down, and then I will go back to the piece to edit it, because I think editing is really important. It's a key piece of the writing process. With critical work, of course, I don't have the luxury of waiting for inspiration, and so I've got to get there. And then I have deadlines as well, so sometimes that lights the fire beneath one's rotunda, and one gets going. But I think it's important with the creative writing. I like to have time and distance from the writing. I think I'm a pretty good editor of my own work, and so what supports getting to the final incarnation is time. I write something down. I think I'm brilliant after I've written it, and then I put it in the drawer for a week or 2 weeks, and I return to it and realize I'm not so brilliant. and then I begin to edit, and then I am brilliant again. So,
what is the title of the book by Faubert, and is it available, if you know, where?
It is the original book, right? It's called Cœur d'Asile. It's out of print, but a Montreal house called Édition Mémoire d'Encrier in Montreal republished it, so you can get them. It's in French, of course, and so that Montreal house published it early 2000s, I think, or yeah. So Cœur d'Asile.
Thank you. Question: what similarities and/or differences have you observed between the struggles of African Americans and Haitian poets?
Oh, that's a great question. Similarities. I think we have, the similarities are that I believe that Haitians and African Americans have always been interested in Black liberation in a variety of ways. We Haitians had the indigenous movement. African Americans had the Harlem Renaissance movement. Articulating connections between each other, I think, has been important. Articulating an identity grounded in or connected to Africa was, I think, an early part of the project for Haitian and African American writers. And then again, Black liberation, whether it's negotiated very explicitly or through explorations of form, because poetry and writing consists of language, and language is what contains ideas and meaning. And so we have to negotiate language. We have to negotiate language in which, for example, that's kind of a basic example, in which things white, right, tend to be connected to notions of goodness, and things Black tend to be connected with things of ideas of evil or badness. And what if one is Black, right? And writing about Blackness, how do you reinscribe Blackness, for example?
Would you be able to speak a little bit about the influence of the Haitian culture in the Americas and Europe?
This is a question of history. I'll start with the 1804 revolution, a revolution in which enslaved people created a nation and fought off one of the most powerful militaries, the French, to create a new state. And that new state was so terrifying to the West, to America and the West that it sought effectively to not recognize it and to try to squash it, because a free Black nation would mean, or what would a free Black nation mean to slave-holding nations? Can you go back to the question, because I think...
It just asks if you could speak a little bit about the influence of Haitian culture in the Americas and Europe.
And Americas and Europe. Who asked this question? This is such a huge.
Huge.
It's such a huge. Okay, it's such a huge question. I think Haiti has served as a beacon for freedom-loving people all over the world. Right?
Yes. Thank you. Absolutely. The work of translation is no easy task, and is harder, one would think, than just writing. What has it meant for your own writing to translate these poems?
Yeah. It's a great question, too. Translating someone gives you access to their mind in very particular ways. It gives you access to their poetics, to how they think about making, creative work. And Ida Faubert writes very differently than the way I write. So I have access to how she thinks in translating, translating her work. I've been translating a contemporary, a living Haitian woman poet, Marie-Célie Agnan, who lives in Montreal. She's fierce and wonderful, and she writes these very long poems. I wouldn't call them epic poems, but she sustains, ideas and weaves these threads through these poems. And before I began translating her, I didn't write long poems, but I just saw what one could do. If you just had that torque, I find her work admirable, and translating her work made me realize the possibilities of a different way of working. My poems are not in any way like hers, but the idea of a kind of a form that could accommodate all kinds of different things was something I had not engaged before I encountered her work, before I translated her.
So, can you tell us about your work with SX Salon?
Sure. I became the creative editor of SX Salon, for Small Axe Salon, which comes from I think it's a Jamaican expression that a tree might be big, but a number of chips from a small axe can bring it down. And I review fiction and poetry for publication in this online journal. So if any of you are writing fiction and poetry that is connected to the Caribbean in some way, I would love to see the work.
Wonderful. How has Haiti been able to maintain a literary tradition with current natural disasters and man-made challenges?
Yes, it's a very good question. I think it is not easy to make art in environments of instability, but often art can be a way to cope with great difficulty. It can mirror what is taking place. It can serve as a site of critique of what is taking place.
As a translator, do you have a particular philosophy that you use when you engage with the work of the author?
And my approach is that you have to do the work of, the initial tedious work of, creating the word-for-word translation, or what is called a trot in translation studies. Then you have to, massage the work, and then at some point you have to leap. You have to leap, because the new text, the poem that's moving, say, from Creole to English or from French to English, has to be a new poem in essence. And when I first started translating, I stayed very, very close to the original text, and I think it could, one could read that. Now I'm more capable and willing to leap. So I may not reflect in the translation the exact idea, but as long as I get the feeling of the idea, the vibe, right, I am happy. So vibe is something that it's a technical term, of course. Vibe is something that I rely on and employ.
Thank you. What do you think Faubert would have experienced as a woman of color in French society in the 20th century, 21st century? And who would have attended her salon in Paris, en Paris?
In the 21st century? Or
It said, well, 20th, in the 20th century.
What would she have experienced? She would have experienced, I would argue, racism. That may or may not have been mitigated by her privilege. So she was a person of privilege. I think she had to negotiate all of that. I think, artists tend to, I won't speak for all artists. As an artist, I'm very open in whoever has interesting ideas, whoever they are, whatever they look like, and as long as those ideas are not dangerous to me. Right? And I think Faubert was probably like that, creating space for people who are interested in ideas, whoever they were. And certainly she was, I think it's safe to say she was queer, so she was, I think, very open to all kinds of experiences and different identities.
The poets that you mentioned are French-speaking and Creole-speaking. Did they know and or support one another?
Yes, they did. Faubert was very connected to Haitian poets, and so was Morisseau Leroy.
Wonderful. And I think this is the final question, which is, do you go back to Haiti very often? And is that how you maintain your connections there?
Yeah, until very recently, I went back to Haiti as an adult for almost every year, twice or three times a year. I have family and extended family there, and I love Haiti. It's become, Haiti, as you know, is dealing with a political, humanitarian crisis. And a failed state, in essence, which has made it challenging for me to go back to Haiti. But yeah, I used to go all the time, and if I could, I would go. It's one of the most beautiful places, to me, in the world. I've seen the most beautiful things in Haiti. I've seen the most awful things in Haiti. It's a country of great contrast, of great culture, and of a proud history.
And I just piggybacking on that, you mentioned that your family was forced to emigrate. Does that mean they were exiled?
I think there's a slight difference between forced emigration and exile, but in essence, or semantic difference, I guess. I guess what's the difference between fearing that you'll be thrown in jail and and disappeared, and moving, and officially being told to move? So that's how I'm going to answer the question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Legros Georges.
Thank you.
CHQ Assembly is made possible through the collaboration and innovation of Chautauqua Institution's full-time and part-time staff, seasonal staff, and many volunteers, as well as participants like you, whose engagement, gifts, and subscriptions sustain our mission.